Welcome back to the channel. This is the Action Figure Grader, and today we're going to talk about the vintage collection, recent sales on eBay. We've got a Haslab update, and a lot of the Mos Eisley cantinas are hitting eBay. That's really pretty much this whole video. When you look at eBay's sold TVC this week, it has been a flood of Haslab cantinas and the carded figures that are inside. And before I started, I wanted to show you a quick photo from this past weekend. My buddy Gary Wallace and his lovely wife came to visit Nashville. They weren't visiting me specifically. And I was riding about 4 hours of sleep in this photo, so I looked like death. But Gary and his wife are lovely people. Gary is one of my very first Patreon members, along with Keith Guppy. And so I just wanted to show this photo because we got to go out to a nice dinner, and then the four of us, including my wife, we got to go hang out at a local establishment. So great seeing you, Gary, and it was a pleasure to meet your wife as well. And she asked me to not include this photo in this video, and so that's why I'm including it, because I want to embarrass her a little bit. She's a collector in her own right, apparently. She likes to do the Lego sets, and apparently their house is completely overrun between Gary and his wife doing their collecting. So we also do have an update from Riv's Junctionite over on Instagram. Make sure to go give him a follow because he puts out lots of good data as it relates to the Haslab. And basically all he was really trying to show here is when you look at the different Haslabs, the percentage of all backers for that particular Haslab during the very last week, the final week of a given Haslab, what does it look like? And if you look at the sail barge and the cantina, over half of the needed backers to get to the final push were during that last week. So, somewhere around 55 to 56%. For the Razor Crest, it was slightly under 50% of the needed backers during the last week. Same with the Ghost. Obviously, the Rancor didn't make it, but even that was around, let's call it 45, 44% of the total backers that were done during the last week. What does that mean? That means that you guys who are backing the gunship are in pretty good shape, because if it follows this sort of trend and you get about 50% of the backers, then you're going to be in good shape. So this is as of today, September 1st. The current total of backers is 4141. So that's over 50% of the total that's needed of 8,000. And during this final week, if it follows the other Haslabs, the history of the Haslabs, and you get 50% of them, that puts you at around 4,000, and that gets you over the target of 8,000. Now, obviously, the tier unlocks are not going to happen. I just don't see that happening at all unless something really crazy happens, and we've talked about that at length already. But at least for those of you that are backing the gunship and are okay with getting the gunship and the two clones and nothing else, it looks like the 8,000 number is pretty safe at this point, unless we see something dramatic happen during the last 7 days, 11 hours, 19 minutes, and 10 seconds. So good luck to those of you that are backing it, and it looks pretty solid at this point. On to the sales on eBay, and again, it's really focused on the Haslab Cantina because those are in hand, and I mean, there were a ton of sales on eBay, but I did have a few others I wanted to at least show you. Mainly some foil examples that sold on eBay. The first one is the VC-13 Anakin Skywalker foil, and that one sold for $200. Pretty solid price on that one. And the Obi-Wan Kenobi sold for $100. That one had some very minor dings at the very top of the card, but that was a pretty good price as well. Same with Clone Commander Cody, one little tiny ding on the left-hand side by the ages 4 and up, but otherwise a very clean example that sold for $150, which is right in line with past sales that we've seen. $125 to $150 should get you a nice foil Clone Commander Cody. And on to some other TVC 1.0. We had an offerless Revenge of the Jedi Luke Endor capture that sold. And obviously this is from the SDCC box set, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but that sounds right. It did have one little nick at the very bottom of the card, which the seller was kind enough to show. That one sold for $110. $110 from Star Wars Galaxies, a pretty well-known seller on eBay. And we had a number of VC64 Slave Leias, both ungraded as well as graded, that sold. And let me tell you, the AFA 90 that sold for a massive price. So we'll get to that in a second. But first is a punched example. This is the retail release of the Revenge of the Jedi VC64 with the prototype FET offer sticker. That one sold for $180. $180 on that one. And that seems to be about the going rate. I mean, this one had some fairly light edge wear at the bottom of the back of the card, but you know, 150 to 175, maybe 180 at the top end. That's probably about as high as I would go for a punched example, but that's what it sold for at 180. And then I've got two different graded examples that sold, and both of these were, I believe, the exact same item, but two different grades. The first one is the AFA 80, and I almost sent this out to my Patreon supporters. It's only an 80 grade, which is, you know, a little bit low for a modern item, but it was at $300 and it's unpunched. And I'm like, well, you know, unpunched, ungraded VC64s, they tend to go around that number as well, you know, $250 to $300. And this one's already graded. And again, admittedly, it's only an 80 grade, but 80, 85, 90 were the subscores on that. And it did end up selling at $300. But as I alluded to, here was the big number. This is the biggest number I've seen for a VC64 Slave Leia. Now, this was an AFA 9.0, and again, the exact same item as the 80 grade. This is a 9.0 Revenge of the Jedi Boba Fett offer. So the retail release again, and it did sell at $875. A huge number, a big number. Now, have we seen bigger numbers in the past? Yes, we have. But given the price correction of the vintage collection in general, at least recently, this is the biggest number. Now, we haven't really seen a high grade VC64 in a while. I don't remember the last time we've seen one. I remember Jeff Jacobs had one on his eBay page that was at auction. That was a 9.0. But again, that was many moons ago. And it sold, I think, in an auction around $1,200. Somewhere in that ballpark. But given the correction in prices, I would not have expected this one to actually go at $875. But it did. It did sell at $875. Big number. But that's encouraging for those of you guys that have some graded, high grade, high desired items like the VC64 Slave Leia. So big number there. All right, so on to recent sales for the Haslab Cantina. And we're going to start off with some of the carded figures. I'm still a little surprised that Nabrun Leeds does not go for that much. It seems like it's consistently going for the least amount versus the others. And maybe it's because there's pretty close approximations of this figure from other lines. I can't remember what line it is, whether it's a legacy collection or whatever, but there is clearly another example out there that's pretty similar to this. But I just think because it's a pretty wacky figure, great card image, I just would have expected this one to do better. Now, the price is not showing on the screen here, but it was around $75. And that's where it's consistently selling for Nabrun Leeds. And then we had Greedo, and I still am having trouble getting over how awesome this card back image is. It really is awesome. It's a pretty significant, in my opinion, I know this might be heresy, but this is a pretty significant upgrade even versus the Kenner one. Bold take there. Bold take there. I'm sure that a lot of you guys will disagree there, but to me, I really like that card bag. That is an awesome looking card bag. And that one sold for $89 plus shipping. And there were several sales, both buy it nows like this, as well as auctions. And at least right now, VC or the Has 010 is selling for around that price. I mean, whether it's an auction or in a buy it now. Werher is consistently going for more. It's going for more than Greedo or Nabrun Leeds. And this seller had 5 available. All 5 sold at $95. Now, I did find a few auctions for Werher that sold below $80, $75 to $80-ish. So This might be one where you want to be patient and wait for an auction versus paying up an extra $15 to $20 in a buy it now situation at 95 bucks. Now, again, 5 of these did sell, but if you are patient in an auction, I did find a couple of data points that were in that $76 to $78 range. Next up, obviously the Tonka sisters, and they are, of course, consistently going for the most money. First, we had Bria. This one sold in an auction for $135.50. Great looking figure there, and the card image is great. This one, the Seni Tanaka, she consistently goes for more, and this one sold for $162.50 in an auction. So about $135 to $140 for Bria, and then Seni Tanaka is consistently going for, I'd say at the low end I found in terms of data points, it was like 150-ish, 155-ish, but more likely it's 160 to 170. And we'll see how that changes. We'll see if that actually comes down at all. But at least right now, that is holding pretty steady even from last week's episode. On to the actual Cantina itself. Now, this one is the Cantina, the base Cantina with no figures. That sold at $305. The deluxe add-on is going for around $200 with no figures, but for just the Cantina itself, $305 was what it sold for at an auction. For everything together, in the deluxe edition, including all the figures, still factory sealed, this one did sell at $850. I did find another data point at $900. So that one has, at least right now, that's kind of typical, right? For right after it gets into collectors' hands. And I do think that if you are patient and wait, this number will come down significantly, much like the Razor Crest did and a few others, but we'll see. Next up, speaking of the Haslab projects, we did have another data point. This is the second data point that we've had in as many weeks for the sail barge at $2,500. So this one sold, buy it now, $2,500 plus $87 shipping. And that's really surprising given some of the past data points over the last 6 months where it got down. I want to say it got below $2,000 for a little while there, and then it started creeping back up again. And now it's very consistently selling at $2,500 for the Katana. Interesting sale there. And then we're going to finish things off with a few graded items as well as multi-packs. First, we've got the Jabba's Palace Court Denizens 4-pack, a great looking 4-pack. This one sold in an auction. 2 bids, $177.50 plus $15 shipping. And then a few of these multi-packs were actually graded at auction and went for really great prices. This was the 3-pack of the Sail Barge Goons, and this one was an AFA 9.0 that sold for $119 free shipping. You can't even get it graded for that much money, so that was a great deal there at $119 free shipping. And another multi-pack is the Bad Batch 4-pack graded AFA 9.0. Again, same seller, free shipping, and it sold for $127.50. Absolutely insane. This one also did have the Hong Kong import-export sticker, whatever you want to call it, which some of them do have this, some of them do not. But that is really cool to see that sell for that price. And you can see that AFA did label it as such, the Hong Kong distribution sticker on the back of the box there. So those two were particularly great deals, given that you really can't even grade them for that much yourself. And then finally, this was an interesting sale that I did not see until after I started looking. This was an AFA 80 Vintage Collection Boba Fett from 2010 archival case, and this one was AFA graded, and it was a prototype. And you can see here it's got the certificate of authenticity from CIB, and it also did have a Tom Derby signature on there. And you'll see on the additional notes on the certificate of authenticity, date stamp 00838 indicates item is an early Hasbro sample. So this is like a factory sample Boba Fett. Those are very desirable among collectors, and I'm shocked that it's sold for that cheap. And to me, to get Boba Fett pre-production, anything related to the vintage collection is very tough to do. And to get one that's already AFA graded with the COA from Tom Derby at $326 plus shipping, I thought that buyer did a really good job there. That was a very great, to me, again, vintage collection prototypes and pre-production samples like this, they just are very difficult to source. Really, your best bet is on Facebook. In some of the Facebook groups, you do see them sometimes, but at least on eBay, they just never make it to eBay. And so I was shocked that this one sold for the price it did. Great price there. And that is really it for this episode of the Vintage Collection Market Update. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to leave me a like if you did. Thanks again for watching, and I'll be back soon.